South Africans plan their celebrations to mark the end of 2023. Some pet owners are in a panic ahead of the planned fireworks displays. The year 2024 will see many countries such as Russia, United States of America, Namibia as well as Botswana going to elections. A very good afternoon. We're coming to you live from our studios here in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. Thank you very much for tuning in. You're watching The Week Ahead. You can interact with us on social media platforms. It's at Week Ahead, and our hashtag is The Week Ahead. I'm your host, Mfundo Mabala. Leading our bulletin this hour, the KwaZulu-Natal Copter MEC, Bongiwes Tole Moloi, has extended her deepest condolences to grieving families. Now, this is following the flash floods in the province. Disaster Management Centre has confirmed earlier this week that their search and rescue teams have discovered the remains of 4 more people in Ladysmith who tragically lost their lives during the devastating floods on Sunday. Copter says the government is committed to providing support, including counselling and assistance with burial arrangements to all affected families. We're joined now by IPSS Medical Search and Rescue spokesperson Samantha Mayrick, who's in KwaZulu-Natal for us. Samantha, good afternoon and thank you very much for joining us.
And thank you very much for having me.
No, it's a pleasure, but honestly, a very terrible festive season that it has become for many families. Can you firstly confirm the number of those deceased at this particular hour and those still unaccounted for?
The last update I had that there were over 20 deceased. The unconfirmed amount of missing people is still 4.
All right. And then to the search and rescue operations for today, what are the conditions for the officials that are on the ground? Is it any easier?
It has become a little bit easier with the water levels dropping. However, the scene is still very muddy. It's still a lot of area to cover. And also, it's still with the debris lying around, which, is not going to be cleared anytime soon.
But there were warnings of inclement weather from the South African Weather Service. Are perhaps the officials all adequately prepared for operations to continue?
Yeah, the search will continue until such time that SABC Search and Rescue deem it unsafe. But yes, earlier in the week, the search continued despite the rain and will continue until it is unsafe for rescuers on the ground.
And then with just your interactions, are you finding that the support offered to families is adequate at this point? Because we have heard that beyond just counselling, those families who cannot afford to bury their loved ones will be assisted.
Absolutely. And we've had foundations on the ground, such as Al Imdad, who's been providing, support to the families in terms of shelter and food. So there is support for the families, also from their greater community. However, it is going to be a long process for them to come to terms with what has happened.
With some of those that you've possibly engaged, how traumatized are they? Because, we even read reports that there's a family that is preparing to bury 7 loved ones.
Oh, absolutely. And it's devastating. It's very difficult to, relate to what they're going through because many of us have never had to experience such a thing. But at the end, it brings some closure to the families, that rescuers have been able to recover their loved ones. It doesn't change what has happened, but it does bring closure, which is, the best we can hope for under these conditions.
Samantha, thank you very much for that update. That's IPSS Medical Search and Rescue spokesperson Samantha Mayrick in KwaZulu-Natal for us. To this story now, the year 2024 will see many countries such as Russia, United States of America, Namibia and Botswana going to elections. Brussels will be hosting the G20 meeting, while Russia will host the BRICS summit and Uganda the G77 meeting.
2024 is likely to be a challenging one as the fate of several leaders around the world hangs in the balance. In the United States of America, the president will be seeking re-election at a time when many believe U.S. global power and prestige are in decline.
Every single year, there's more and more cures coming. Every single solitary year. So as my father would say, keep the faith. We're going to beat all this. I promise you. I promise you.
The unprecedented millions of Biden illegal aliens who are invading our country, it is only common sense that when I'm reelected, we will begin and we have no choice. The largest deportation operation in American history. We have no choice. On my first day back in the White House, I will terminate every open borders policy of the Biden administration. And I will invoke the Alien Enemies Act to remove all known or suspected gang members, drug dealers, or cartel members from the United States, ending the scourge of illegal alien gang violence once and for all.
As for the United States, we are ready to build relations with them as well. We believe that the United States is an important and necessary country in the world. But this imperial, absolutely imperial policy hinders them. Not even us. How so? Because in the public consciousness, they should behave like an empire. If they agree on something or concede to someone, it is already perceived by the electorate as some kind of failure or vacuum. So the elites are forced to behave in this way to some extent.
In India, the Prime Minister is confident that he will come back. In the United Kingdom, the Prime Minister is working hard to ensure that he gets an endorsement. Namibia is expected to see an end to the presidency of Hagengop.
Position of responsibility has challenges, but challenges should be seen not in a negative way, but they must be seen in a positive way. It's a challenge in the sense that the people who have elected you, they are looking upon you to do what they expect you to do. In other words, the expectation of the people is there and it needs to be met.
In Botswana, the current president will be campaigning for a second endorsement. A breakaway from the governing party is pushing hard to unseat Mokgweetsi Masisi.
This is a time where we really need to have good leadership in some of the countries. Not all, but some of the countries on the continent are being let down by its leaders. And that is the situation that we are having in Botswana. Because for more than 50 years, we were on a very good trajectory. And we were, can I use the word, the darling of the continent.
Sophie Mgweni, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Now, as South Africa gears up for national elections next year, 2024 is not just an election year, it's perhaps the election year. Globally, more voters than ever in history will head to the polls as at least 64 countries, plus the European Union, representing a combined population of about 49% of the people in the world, are meant to hold national elections, the results of which for many will prove consequential for years to come. Ukraine, Ghana, Mali and Madagascar will also hold polls. For more, we're joined by SABC News International Editor Sophie Mgweni. Ms. Sophie, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Mfundo. Maybe we can say Happy New Year to those who are watching us online in New Zealand.
Most certainly. We already saw some of those celebrations online. They have indeed entered the year 2024, that is New Zealand. Then to what we're expecting politically in 2024, it will be quite the year. Let's start with Russia, which heads to the polls in March. We understand that the recently annexed parts of Ukraine, such as Donetsk, will partake in the vote. What is being stated on the ground insofar as these regions that have been annexed are concerned?
Well, you know that the current president, Vladimir Putin, has already presented his credentials to the organization that deals, or an institution that deals with elections. And we expect him to be a front runner, but you have people who are intending to contest. But when you look at the support on the ground, because of the war in Ukraine, I think many Russians will rally behind the current leadership, because during conflict, you have a situation where a nation will rally behind the leadership that's seen as protecting or defending the country. For example, in a country like Israel right now, you see how Benjamin Netanyahu is using the war between, or the attack on Gaza with the aim of rooting out Hamas as a rallying point. So you have those who say he can continue until this matter is settled. The same with what's happening in Russia and Ukraine. You have people who are saying that. But of course, you also have people on the ground who feel that they would want to try and challenge Putin.
It's quite interesting because you do indicate that it's come at a great cost, this war. But funny enough, it seems his popularity has somewhat increased as opposed to at the very start of the war. Because when just going through just some of those approval ratings, it seems at the start of the invasion of Ukraine, he was not so popular. But he's become popular over the course of that war. Just particularly in October, when those stats came out, it seemed that indeed his popularity has increased.
Yes, I think the war presented him with an opportunity to cement the independence of Russia economically, politically, and military-wise. Because you could see that in terms of the military capabilities, Russia is one of the most developed countries in relation to military capabilities, including a nuclear power. Secondly, when the Western powers, including the United States of America as part of the NATO alliance, try to impose sanctions on Russia, Russia was able to navigate that and was able to continue to do business or continue trade with other countries. And the other important issue, he was able to expose the West and America that they have become shopkeepers of the world in a negative way. And they want to dictate to everybody in terms of how they should conduct themselves or run their own affairs in their own respective countries. And therefore using the newly formed bloc, BRICS, to cement his authority that there can be countries that will challenge your powerful position as developed countries, and also supporting the developing nations. And that international approach of foreign policy and global state provided him an opportunity, or gave him an opportunity, to be able to say, yes, US and West, you are not as powerful as you are. And I think for Russians, they saw him as a man who was able to defend Russia, but also to position Russia on this global stage, and came up with alternatives when Russia was squeezed.
And then on the conversation around the deployment of older politicians, it's one that's being had across the globe. Yes, Mr. Putin is 71 years old, but we do know that in 2020, Russians amended their constitution, which means he is in fact eligible to seek 2 more 6-year terms. And if he were to succeed, by that time he would rule until he's 83. Is there no moderate opposition in the country to the deployment of older politicians like what we've seen across the world?
Some would say, why not the US? Why point fingers to other countries? It's the same in the United States of America. Joe Biden will be seeking re-election, and he's quite senior. And therefore, that argument will not hold water in terms of other countries pointing to that issue. But the reality is the young people around the world are really restless. They want to see young leadership with brilliant minds, with young approach, innovation, because the world is evolving. But unfortunately, particularly in times of challenges and conflict, you will see senior people still leading. Biden became a president at a time where America had lost its credibility and stature under Donald Trump. And he stabilized that the strength of the United States of America, even though globally they are also losing that support because of the war in Ukraine and now the war in the Middle East. So in many countries, you see senior people continuing, particularly during challenging times.
Now that you've touched on the United States, just looking at the number of candidates that are standing, they're going to the polls in November, so it's a bit later on in 2024. But if we look at the candidates that are standing now, there are quite a lot, but nevertheless, it still seems like there are two obvious front runners, being Donald Trump for the Republicans and Joe Biden for the Democrats. What have been your observation around this contest?
You are correct. The front runners are Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Donald Trump focusing on the right-wing movement and people and those who feel that America is not the America they want, particularly the racists. And then on the other hand, you have Joe Biden who's looking at getting votes from young people and the other minority groups, because what Trump is offering goes against what the particular minority would want to see happening in the United States of America. But there's now a huge problem for Biden. The war in Ukraine, he was able to navigate that. But the Middle East conflict, he's really going to be in trouble with those who are supporting Palestine. And when you watch the protests every day in New York, in Washington, in different states, you can see that those are huge numbers. Now the question is, will those who are in support of Palestine vote for Biden, who even yesterday approved a budget without consulting Congress to support arms to Israel and Hamas? I don't know. I think that will be his major challenge. In terms of the economy, he had turned the situation around. He was doing well. Even the issue of COVID, post-COVID, inheriting a country that had to deal with COVID and was affected, he was able to reverse that. But in the global stage, I think any leader, particularly the powerful ones, or the powerful countries, who is contesting elections next year, the issue of the Middle East in particular, and a bit of perhaps Ukraine war, will have an impact how the individuals perform as presidential candidates, or perhaps leading, being the face of their political parties with the hope that they will win elections. For example, a country like South Africa, where you don't have a presidential election, but you vote for the party. The president of South Africa, the issue of the Middle East will definitely have a bearing, or will be a factor on how those who support Palestine in South Africa vote next year, and those who support Israel vote next year. And therefore, all over the world, it will be similar. The United Kingdom, the current Prime Minister will have to deal with that. And we saw those big protests in London. All these countries will have to cross that hurdle, and also including Putin. That is why Putin is really advancing in terms of not being very forceful on what's happening in the Middle East, but still condemning what's happening in the Middle East. Unfortunately, he's dealing with something major in Ukraine, and the Russians might rally behind him.
It will most certainly be very interesting to see how Biden's campaign is impacted by the decision to fund the Ukraine as well as Israel's counteroffensive. But just lastly, in your engagements with leaders on the African continent thus far, are you getting a sense of which electoral outcome the continent is leaning towards? Does it seem as though a Trump or Biden win would be most desirable for the continent? Which one are you getting a sense is more desirable for Africa?
Well, I think some might say Biden, because they can engage him. He does engage African leaders. However, Guy pointed out, the issue of the Middle East and the war in Ukraine, Africa will find it very hard to really come out clear in terms of their views on what's happening in America. But the reality is America is always America, no matter who becomes the president of the United States of America. It is always America first. It is the mighty United States of America in terms of how they approach issues. It is the leading economy in the world in terms of how they approach issues. So at times, it doesn't really matter. In fact, at some point in time, I was talking to the former South African President, Thabo Mbeki. He was saying, in fact, under the Republicans, you see action, much as they, in terms of talk, they are not people you can really align yourself with. But with Democrats, much as they are the friends of South Africa, in practical terms, little is being done when you have a president or from that party. And therefore, that is why I'm saying at the end of the day, America is always America first. It's all about the interest of America. We saw during the war in Ukraine, and even now we can see. But the reality is, Joe Biden does speak to leaders on the continent. I mean, I know that he does speak to our own President Cyril Ramaphosa, and it depends on where you stand. The reality is America will always be America, and in any case, every country has to fight for its own interest.
Sophie, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. That was SABC News International Editor Sophie Mukwena talking to us about the political year ahead. 2024 is going to be a very busy one, including for us, South Africa, as we indeed also head to the polls. Now, with the 2024 general elections anticipated to be as important as the first democratic election in 1994, South Africa is witnessing a seismic shift in the country's political landscape. Throughout the year, there's been a speculation as to whether any party will get an outright majority and be a decisive winner. This happens at a time when various surveys indicate that the governing party, the ANC, might dip below 50%. It provides an opportunity for opposition parties to find new and innovative ways to topple the previously unassailable ANC.
Next year's elections are deemed to be a watershed moment. For many, this will be the same as the first democratic elections held in 1994 in an effort to dethrone the ANC, which has been in power for close to 3 decades. Some opposition parties have come together. For the country's second largest political party, it started with the election of a new leadership in April, with John Steenhuisen being re-elected as federal leader of the Democratic Alliance.
Sanibonani, it is an honor to stand with all of you today in Gauteng, the next province to be governed by the DA. And today, I ask you to re-elect me as the leader of our beloved party.
Steenhuisen defeated former Johannesburg Mayor Mpho, while Helen Zille retained her position of chairperson of the Federal Council.
That 2024 is going to be about the DA's moonshot election. Now, while the term moonshot originally meant a long shot, it is increasingly being used to describe a monumental effort and a lofty goal. In other words, a giant leap forward. A leap like ensuring that the DA leads the national government in 2024. And like the original mission to take humans to the moon, we take this shot to defeat the ANC and to keep the EFF out, not because it is easy, but because it is hard.
This was also where Steenhuisen laid out the party's plan for the 2024 elections, the announcement of a so-called Moonshot Pact. The pact consisted of the DA, Action SA, IFP, and Freedom Front Plus, amongst others. In a quest to oust the ANC, these parties took the arrangement to the next level. An announcement was made that it would move from being called a moonshot pact to the now multi-party charter.
While they contest elections as individual parties, South Africans will see that they are greater than the sum of their parts. The name of this agreement is the Multi-Party Charter for South Africa. The nature of the agreement, it is the form of a pre-election arrangement. The vision for South Africa, a new government to build a just, inclusive and prosperous South Africa based on opportunity, freedom and security for all its citizens.
Another political highlight of the year was the 10th anniversary of the third largest party in the National Assembly, the EFF. The Red Beret had achieved their goal and they painted the FNB Stadium red in July. The celebration left many in awe. The gathering, dubbed the Festival of the Poorest of the Poor, saw the party celebrate a decade of unbroken struggle.
It's not a stipend, it's a bribery so that you can vote for the ANC. We don't want a bribery. We want the land, we want jobs, and we want the manje. We want them now, and it must be quality jobs.
They must go home. Abahambe, 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 Abahambe.
Also marking a decade was the Patriotic Alliance. The PA attempted unsuccessfully to fill the more than 37,000 capacity Orlando Stadium in November. It blamed sabotage for what turned out to be a damp squib. The Patriotic Alliance has no seats in Parliament, but believes that next year's elections will change its fortunes. PA leader Gayton McKenzie made it clear that if given a chance, the party will embark on a mass deportation of undocumented foreign nationals.
We are going to remove each and every illegal foreigner in this country. We will give a reward for us to chase them at every hook, nook and cranny of this country. We shall close businesses that still hire illegal foreigners.
After the passing of the founder of the IFP, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, in September, the party held its policy conference. This as talks continue on whether it will remain among South Africa's most popular political parties with the passing of the elderly statesman.
The 2024 elections are unlike the 2019 elections or the 2014 elections or any elections that has gone before. They will not be business as usual, delivering the expected results and seeing very little change.
The National Freedom Party remains divided despite holding its elective conference recently. Divisions in the party started after its founder and president Zanele Kamagwaza Msibi's death in 2021. The jury is still out as to how the party will fare in next year's elections.
We feel humbled and we are honored in the memory of our late president. Justice and political democracy has been served in the NFP. We have given rebirth to this organization. Right now, our main focus, as I said to you earlier on, we're going to look at stabilizing the organization. We're going to create legitimate party structures at the national level. We still need to appoint certain members to the national executive, further finalize the national working committee, which is the highest decision-making body of the organization between conferences.
As the country goes into election mode, Just over 600 parties are registered with the IEC, of which about 360 are eligible to contest in the national and provincial elections. Whether this unprecedented number of participants will result in a more diverse parliament is still to be seen. With coalitions being the order of the day, however, it is possible that some parties simply want to capitalize on what little support they can garner to enable them to leverage power in government that will be formed post the polls. Ntantla Khatlani, SABC News, Johannesburg.
We shift our focus to this story now. It's all systems go for the 2024 KwaZulu-Natal event, which will take place on the 2nd of January. Tweede Nuwe Jaar, which literally means Second New Year, is rooted in the slave history of Cape Town. Slaves were only allowed a single day off work a year, and they used the opportunity to celebrate. Joining us for more on this is Munib Gambino. He's the director of the KwaZulu-Natal Carnival Association. Munib, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon. It's an absolute pleasure. Good afternoon to your viewers.
No, it's a pleasure as well to have you with us. Perhaps just for the benefit of those who might not be familiar with the history of the festival, can you just take us through it a little bit?
So as you introduced it to the viewers, it's really a celebration of a form of acute freedom or emancipation that our enslaved ancestors experienced on the 2nd of January. It so happens that on the 1st of January, they all had to work in service because the masters were still celebrating the New Year, or the beginning of the New Year. And so on the 2nd of New Year, they would get a day off and go and picnic at places like Soetwater and the Glen, Camps Bay as it's known today, and Clifton Beaches. And this is where we found kinsmanship, and we really sort of started practicing this Guma music of ours by utilizing the Guma drum as we still use today. Today's carnival is a very different carnival. It's a carnival where we see thousands of participants, and it has, whilst it has very deep historical meaning to us, we also utilize the carnival to add meaning to people's lives today by unlocking the intrinsic value of this carnival, creating opportunities for our people.
What a wonderful history it has. And I suppose many would want to be a part of it in solidarity with those back then who couldn't celebrate the 1st as the beginning of the new year. But then insofar as preparations are concerned, how is everything going?
Everything is going fantastic. We've been fully prepared 2 weeks ago already. Our teams are on site, of course, building up the infrastructure that we require. We're expecting in excess of 100,000 spectators in the CBD of Cape Town. And of course, the most important people, the participating minstrels. And as things stand, we'll have approximately 20,000 individual minstrels parading from Keisergracht in the old District 6, or Nova Street rather, as we've rightfully renamed it again, past the City Hall and up towards the historical Boerkaap where the procession ends. The idea really is to get Cape Townians and visitors to Cape Town into the CBD on that day and celebrate what is uniquely Cape Town and what is really something that is unmatched globally. There's nothing quite like the KwaZulu-Natal Carnival. Our teams, together with our partners, Hollywood Pets and the City of Cape Town, we've really worked hard this year to drive our program of transforming the carnival, which is a carnival of hope, where there's typically hopelessness on the Cape Flats. People living in squalor, and on the 2nd of January, you can truly see the full effect that the work that we do and that this carnival and that the rhythm of this carnival has on the people of Cape Town.
Most certainly commendable. Now, this is a free event, and obviously there'll be a number of spectators. So when it comes to safety, for some that would want to come, it would be somewhat of a concern. Just talk to us about the safety measures that have been put for this particular event.
We've taken care of that concern years ago by visiting, as you say, safety concerns that presents itself with this amount of people that come into the CBD. We employ in excess of 600 security personnel, SABCs on site all of the other safety authorities and security authorities of the city, they all on site, and we deep dive into proper preparation in order to ensure that it's a safe and enjoyable event for everyone. And the record shows that for the last 5 years, if not more, this has been an incident-free event. The only caution, though, is that it's going to be particularly hot on Tuesday, and those who do come down should prepare themselves properly, wear sun hats, use sunscreen, and ensure that they hydrate properly. It's a long day, it's a fun day, but we should take care of our own safety as well.
Munib, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. That was Munib Gambino, Kapsa Klopsa Carnival Association, talking to us there about the preparations of the Tweede Nuwe Jaar that's taking place. More news on the other side of this break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa has reflected on a difficult year for many South Africans, marked by many challenges, including unemployment, poverty, crime, gender-based violence, rising food prices, and a severe electricity crisis. In his New Year's message, Ramaphosa has called on South Africans not to give up, as the new year also brings hope for better things, one of the highlights of the new year being the country celebrating 3 decades of independence.
My fellow South Africans, we have come to the end of another year. 2023 has been a difficult year for many South Africans. Yet, despite the many challenges that our country is facing, we do have cause for hope and optimism. Our hope and our optimism is based on the knowledge that we have faced many hardships and challenges in the past, but we have overcome them. I therefore firmly believe that better days lie ahead for our people and our country. In 2024, we will mark 30 years since we attained our freedom. This freedom we attained ushered in enormous changes in our country. As we reflect on our journey over these 3 decades, we are reminded of how far we have come and of the important progress that we have made since 1994. The findings of Census 2022, which were released earlier this year, relate how our country has been transformed in a number of respects to enable South Africans to lead lives of dignity. In South Africa today, nearly 9 out of 10 households live in formal dwellings. This was not the case 30 years ago. Close to 95% of our people have access to electricity. 8 out of 10 households have access to water, either inside their dwellings or in their yards. The proportion of young people in education has grown dramatically. Matric pass rates have improved, and a far greater proportion of adults in our country have completed high school. This is a country that is moving ahead with determination and purpose to steadily reduce the poverty that we inherited in 1994. Just as we continue to work to overcome the legacy of our past, so too will we rise to meet our current challenges of unemployment, of poverty, of crime, gender-based violence, rising food prices, and a severe electricity crisis, as well as a logistic crisis. It is the poorest of our people who are most affected by these problems. To address these challenges, we are at work to rebuild our economy and our society in the wake of the devastating COVID-19 pandemic. Notwithstanding the many setbacks that we have had to confront, our economy has proven to be resilient and is now larger than it was before the pandemic struck. Under difficult conditions, we have recovered the jobs that were lost due to COVID-19. While we experienced some of the worst load shedding ever in the first few months of 2023, through an intense focus on implementing the Energy Action Plan, there has since been a steady decline in the severity of load shedding. Through regulatory changes and other measures, we are seeing massive new investment in energy generation and in the installation of rooftop solar. The Northern Cape alone has seen well over 70 billion rand of investments in renewable energy as the sunniest province in our country. We are encouraged by the confidence of local businesses and international investors in our country's prospects. We continue to attract new investment, which supports the growth of local businesses and creates more jobs. Government departments, Transnet, industry, and other social partners, as well as Eskom, are working closely to address the electricity challenge and also working closely to relieve congestion at our ports and increase the volumes of freight being carried on our key rail corridors. To address the crisis of unemployment, government has undertaken a number of interventions, including the Presidential Employment Stimulus. This initiative represents the largest expansion of public employment in our country's history. It has provided life-changing opportunities to more than 1.2 million unemployed South Africans in a number of sectors such as education, agriculture, environmental management and conservation, science and innovation, and the creative sector. This year, Parliament passed a number of laws aimed at further improving the lives of South Africans. These laws include the National Health Insurance Bill, which will pave the way for equality in the provision of healthcare services to all our people. We are making progress in the fight against corruption, including bringing those responsible for state capture to justice. We are putting in place laws, institutions, and practices that reduce the potential for corruption. To build communities that are safe and secure, the South African Police Service has established specialized task teams to tackle organized and violent crime, as well as crimes of economic sabotage. To bolster our fight against criminality, we have trained and continue to train thousands of new policemen and women. In advancing our country's development, we will remain engaged in matters of global concern. We will continue to work to ensure that those countries with the greatest responsibility for global warming support developing economies to respond to the effects of climate change, to address the challenges such as floods and fires that many developing economy countries are going through, such as ours. As a country that itself emerged from a bitter past to build a united nation, we will continue to work for reconciliation, peace, and an end to conflict and war. We have maintained a principled position against the continued oppression of the Palestinian people. and reaffirmed our support for their quest for full nationhood and self-determination. We are deeply concerned by the onslaught against the residents of Gaza and the West Bank. We condemn all violence against civilians, both Palestinians and Israeli. We call for an immediate ceasefire and dialogue towards a lasting, peaceful resolution of the conflict. At this time, we pay tribute to the courage and resilience, as well as determination of South African people who have shown time and time again their ability to rise above difficulty and to embrace their common humanity. South Africa is a nation of heroes, many of them unseen and unknown. Our nation's sportsmen and women made our country proud this year. We were inspired by the victory of the Springboks at the Rugby World Cup, which they won for the 4th time, more than any other nation. The achievements of our Special Olympians made our spirits soar as a nation. The achievements of Banyana Banyana in the Africa Cup of Nations for women the previous time also made us very proud. I thank all those people who are working day by day to make our country a better place. From healthcare workers to entrepreneurs, from policemen and women to firefighters, from teachers to farmers and farm workers, from religious leaders to public servants. We remember with sadness the many compatriots who have lost their lives over the past year to disease, to crime, to road accidents, and to natural disasters. We mourn the recent loss of life and property in floods and fires in different parts of our country. We salute the rapid response teams that have always responded to these disasters to save life and property. Just a few days ago, we learned of the tragic passing of the great Mbongeni Ngema, whose creative work entertained and inspired South Africans over many decades. As the old year draws to an end and the new year dawns, let us recall the words that he penned. He said, we must come together and realize a nation that unity is our responsibility. Love for our nation, he said, is the key for the future, for peace and prosperity. It has always been our greatest strength that we are able to come together as South Africans in times of difficulty, anchored by our shared commitment to our beautiful country. As long as we remain united, and as long as we continue to work together, and as long as we are united around our common vision, we will succeed, and I'm sure we will go further. As we look back on the year that has passed and the challenges it has brought, we must look to the future with hope. We must continue to move forward. We must never lose our courage, and we must remain determined to leave no one behind. I wish you all a happy and healthy new year. Let us welcome 2024 with strength and courage. I thank you.
Now, as South Africans plan their celebrations to mark the end of 2023, some pet owners are in a panic ahead of the planned fireworks displays. Dog owners say they worry about the disregard for bylaws by some users of fireworks, which causes great distress for their pets. Kimberley's Salt Lake municipality has joined the chorus of those cautioning against the irresponsible use of fireworks.
A colorful display of fireworks is a much-loved way to usher in the new year. Many are already purchasing firecrackers for their families. But for Michelle Schroeder, who owns 2 dogs, New Year's Eve celebrations can be a nightmare. Schroeder says she already has plans in place to keep her dogs calm during the fireworks displays.
Dogs' ears are 4 times, can hear 4 times better than humans. So you can imagine these fireworks are extremely loud to them. They're also really good at hearing vibrations and being able to tell the distance of the fireworks. And fireworks are very unpredictable, so you can imagine it seems like a threat to the dogs. So the most important thing to do for your dogs is to make sure they're inside. Try and close your windows, close your blinds to prevent as much noise from getting in as possible, and try and make them nice and comfortable.
Vainant Kalis is equally worried about the impact the noise of the fireworks will have on his pet. Kalis, who previously owned a Jack Russell, says this time of the year causes great distress for dogs.
We had a dog that really had severe panic attacks and anxiety attacks, and had to be given medication to calm down. And even then it would still be moaning and whining, so it was struggling. And it's hard as a pet owner. There's not much you can do. You can't go around policing fireworks.
Meanwhile, police in the province have cautioned the public that those who violate the bylaws regulating the use of fireworks will be arrested this weekend. Residents are implored to familiarize themselves with content of the applicable bylaws.
The use of fireworks in South Africa is regulated by bylaws under the Explosive Act 1956. Members of the community are urged to abide by these laws and report any resistance to the South African Police Service.
Hawkers, however, are cashing in during this period. Many are selling big explosive fireworks that create a colorful display.
Things really went up lately. Like last year we would buy these things for like 40 rand, 50 rand. Now the price is almost doubled, you see.
When I sell the crackers to the people, I told them how these things work and what are they supposed to do. You see, not just buy the thing and just light this thing for lighting. No, because this thing can maybe explode in your hand.
Those planning to use fireworks on New Year's Eve are urged to be mindful of the effect on domestic animals. They are also warned against the illegal use of firecrackers, which can pose a risk to the user and those around them. Tebogo Msimanga, SABC News, Kimberley.
All right, and that's where we leave it for today. Enjoy your new year. It's our final show for the new year. Happy New Year when we see you again next week.